at 5:17 a.m. On March 4, 2026, the parking lot outside Bayline Marine Services Facility 7 in Houma, Louisiana, filled with black federal SUVs. Fog sat low over the bayou, the gravel was wet, the temperature hovered just above 50 degrees. Engines shut off almost simultaneously. Doors opened in sequence. More than 60 federal agents in tactical gear stepped out into the dark and moved toward the main service buildings without a single siren. At that same moment, across Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle, 25 other teams were doing the exact same thing. A total of 26 marina and marine repair locations were being hit at once. The operation had been coordinated down to the minute. FBI, DIA, Coast Guard Investigative Service, tactical teams, financial seizure teams, digital forensics, aerial support, boat-based perimeter units, over 700 personnel moving against a maritime business network that until then had looked like one of the Gulf Coast's biggest small business success stories. Inside Facility 7, a night crew was working on a 42-foot center console. The work order on file described standard post-service adjustments. What the crew was actually doing was welding a hidden compartment into the hull cavity, a compartment large enough to hold roughly $6 million in vacuum-sealed cash bricks. They never finished the weld. That morning became the public face of Operation Dry Dock, a 14-month federal investigation into what prosecutors would later describe as the largest maritime money laundering system ever dismantled on the Gulf Coast. On paper, Bayline Marine Services was exactly the kind of company state officials like to celebrate. Founded in 2017, veteran-owned, rapidly expanding, good local reputation, strong online reviews, municipal contracts, commercial repair accounts. By 2025, Bayline operated 26 locations, employed roughly 900 people, and serviced everything from shrimp boats to pleasure yachts to municipal vessels. It had even picked up a Better Business Bureau Recognition Award in 2024. But the business the public saw was only the visible layer. Beneath it, according to federal investigators, Bayline had spent years turning recreational vessels into outbound cash couriers for cartel money. The investigation did not begin with a confidential informant. It began with a fuel anomaly. On November 9, 2025, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter conducting routine patrol off Grand Isle, Louisiana, encountered a 38-foot recreational yacht drifting outside its filed navigation corridor. Nothing about the stop looked extraordinary at first. The vessel was a Sea Ray Sundancer registered to a shell company. The captain said he had been out fishing for the weekend. His paperwork appeared current. The boarding was standard. 2 Coast Guard officers came aboard to verify documentation and inspect basic systems. Then, one of them noticed a detail that didn't fit. The yacht's fuel readings didn't match the route it had traveled. Based on departure time, engine hours, and GPS movement, the vessel should have burned through most of its load, but the tank reading remained suspiciously high. That discrepancy triggered a closer look at the fuel system. The captain's reaction changed immediately. Not panic, not confusion. Something flatter than that. Something closer to resignation. Behind a recently installed auxiliary fuel bladder in the aft compartment, Coast Guard personnel found 42 vacuum-sealed cash packages, each containing $100,000 in mixed-denomination currency. Total, $4.2 million. The money wasn't loose. It wasn't hastily concealed. It was fitted into a cavity built with custom brackets and bypass plumbing designed to make the vessel's fuel readings appear normal during basic review. This was not amateur concealment. It was engineered. The maintenance records on the yacht showed a service entry from less than 30 days earlier. The listed work had been performed at Bayline Marine Services, Location 12, Houma, Louisiana. Invoice amount $3,847. Paid in cash. That one invoice pushed the matter out of routine Coast Guard enforcement and into a larger federal review. On November 14, 2025, the FBI's Houston field office received the referral. A preliminary team pulled Bayline's corporate filings, tax records, customer databases, loan histories, and service records. The numbers raised concerns almost immediately. Bayline's profit margins were far too high for a marine repair business. By late November 2025, investigators concluded that the company had been reporting margins around 31%. In marine maintenance, that number doesn't make sense. Standard repair operations on the Gulf Coast run much lower. Even efficient, well-managed shops with healthy volume don't touch that level consistently across multiple years. Bayline did. And there was another number that looked even stranger: repeat service. According to Bayline's own records, nearly 47% of its customers returned within a 90-day window. That might sound positive in another industry. In boat maintenance, it is bizarre. Recreational vessel owners do not normally bring the same boats back every few months for major service work over and over again. Yet Bayline's logs showed vessels returning 7, 8, even 9 times in a single year for combinations of plausible-sounding repairs: hull cleaning, fuel system work, electrical inspection, bilge overhaul, prop balance, water tank service. Individually, the invoices looked normal. Together, they described boats receiving more maintenance than aircraft. The FBI came to a different conclusion. The boats were not returning for repairs. They were returning for loading. If you're finding value in this story, hit the like button now. It helps this channel continue producing investigations like this one. By early December 2025, the FBI had enough to request a full investigation. The Bureau coordinated with the DIA's New Orleans Field Division and the Coast Guard Investigative Service. The case was given a name: Operation Dry Dock. The first problem was access. Bayline's waterfront sites were difficult to penetrate from outside. They were fenced, camera-covered, and access-controlled. Workers used key cards. Visitors were logged. Many sites had multiple buildings, open water exposure, and active repair bays where a surveillance team would stand out immediately. The Bureau made a decision that shaped the rest of the case. They would go inside. Between December 2025 and January 2026, the FBI inserted 9 undercover agents across 6 Bayline locations. The cover identities were carefully built: marine mechanics, fiberglass specialists, dock workers, shop technicians. The resumes were backed. Employment histories could be verified. The skill sets were real enough that the agents could actually perform the jobs they were applying for. One of those agents, operating under the name Mark Reyes, was hired at Bayline's Houma facility on December 11, 2025. For the first 2 weeks, he saw nothing that would justify a major federal takedown. Oil changes, zinc replacement, washdowns, routine diagnostics, ordinary shop talk, football arguments, long shifts, lunch breaks in pickup trucks. Then, on December 27, 2025, he was assigned to Bay 4. Bay 4 was one of a handful of restricted service bays at the Houma site. Not every employee worked there. Access rotated through a smaller group. On paper, it was still part of ordinary service operations. In practice, it was something else. That day, the assigned vessel was a 36-foot Grady White. The official work order listed standard diagnostic and fuel line replacement work. Then a senior technician pulled a second work order from a locked cabinet. That document had no customer name, no registration number, only a code and a notation referencing a package prep process. The undercover agent was told to assist with panel removal beneath the helm area. Behind the interior paneling was a cavity already cut into the hull liner. Then came the welding kit, then aluminum mounting rails, then test fitting using blocks sized almost perfectly to match the vacuum-sealed cash bricks recovered by the Coast Guard weeks earlier. The agent's concealed camera captured more than 4 hours of footage. When the compartment was complete, it disappeared behind the original trim. The seams were invisible. The paint matched. The fasteners looked factory installed. Even a detailed inspection would likely miss it without direct disassembly. That footage changed the case. By January 2026, the undercover agents were documenting the same pattern at multiple bayline sites. Each location had restricted bays. Each restricted bay operated with a dual paperwork system, one visible work order for legitimate repair, and one coded order for hidden compartment preparation. The compartment designs varied depending on vessel type. On center consoles and bay boats, crews used space under the helm, inside leaning posts, or beneath deck sections. On larger yachts and sport fishers, they used modified water tanks, auxiliary fuel bladder systems, void space between the hull and liner, and hidden compartments behind cabinetry or salon flooring. One location near Biloxi had developed a method for concealing packages inside factory hardtop voids, an area rarely checked even by experienced marine inspectors. The craftsmanship was not improvised. Marine-grade FIFIO52 aluminum, welds ground flush, matching paint, stainless hardware, molded trim reinstalled with almost no visible sign of modification. This was not a one-off smuggling trick, it was precision fabrication. Then, investigators discovered the next layer. At location 19 in Pascagoula, Mississippi, an undercover agent observed that some boats did not get loaded at bayline facilities at all. They were modified at the marina, then trailered or moved to secondary sites, private docks, residential boathouses, isolated waterfront properties, even a cold storage location in Gulfport. That's where the loading happened. Surveillance teams followed several of those vessels after modification. At the secondary sites, duffel bags arrived by vehicle from cities like Houston, Dallas, and Atlanta. Inside were standardized vacuum-sealed bundles of cash. Each brick contained $100,000. The bricks were packed into the custom compartments, the boats were returned to water, then came the offshore runs. The vessels did not blast away at high speed, that would have drawn attention. Instead, they followed recreational patterns, normal launch points, ordinary cruising speeds, plausible fishing or leisure routes into the Gulf. At pre-selected coordinates in international waters, the boats idled. Then, within 1 to 3 hours, a second vessel arrived, usually larger, sometimes a commercial fishing boat, sometimes a crew boat like the kind used in offshore energy support work. The transfer occurred at sea. Cash moved from the recreational vessel to the larger ship. The recreational vessel returned. Often it went straight back to bayline within days for post-service inspection or follow-up work, where the hidden compartment would be removed and the vessel restored to factory appearance. By late February 2026, investigators had tracked 14 confirmed offshore handoffs. Coast Guard aerial units photographed several of them under cover of routine maritime interdiction activity. In each case, the receiving vessel continued south or southeast toward Mexican or Central American waters. That was when the scale became clear. Bayline was not a local laundering scheme. It was a maritime export system for cartel cash. The FBI's Forensic Accounting Unit began reconstructing the totals. Analysts used 3 overlapping datasets: Bayline's internal records obtained under sealed process, bank activity tied to the business and its subsidiaries, and observations from undercover operations and surveillance. The accounting team used conservative methodology. They counted only vessels for which compartment installation and offshore movement could be corroborated by at least 2 independent data points. Even with that narrow standard, the totals were staggering. By mid-February 2026, investigators had identified 312 vessels processed through the Bayline system between January 2023 and February 2026. Average load estimate per vessel, roughly $5.1 million. Total estimated cash throughput, $1.6 billion. More than $1.5 billion in cartel proceeds had been physically moved out of the United States through the hulls, tanks, and void spaces of recreational boats. And many of the owners had no idea. That part mattered. Bayline often contacted vessel owners with offers of discounted maintenance, complimentary follow-up service, or free sea trials after major work. The owners signed releases allowing Bayline staff to conduct performance checks offshore. The owners believed their boats were being tested. Federal investigators believe many of those same boats were actually being used as cash mules in international waters. The public face of this system was Raymond Arsenault. He was the founder of Bayline Marine Services, former Navy machinist's mate. Honorable discharge, strong reputation, born and raised in Louisiana, the kind of biography that explains trust before you even verify it. He started small, one shop, good work, fair pricing, strong local word of mouth. Then came expansion. One site became 3, 3 became 9, 9 became 18. By 2025, Bayline stood at 26 locations. The pace of growth was extraordinary for a marine service chain. Trade publications featured him. Regional business groups praised him. State officials recognized him as a local success story. But growth at that speed required capital. And the capital did not come from normal lending. By reviewing loans issued between 2019 and 2021, investigators found more than $23 million in financing from 3 entities registered in Delaware. The beneficial ownership of those entities led through offshore structures tied to the Cayman Islands and Belize. The terms were absurdly favorable. Low interest, long amortization, no meaningful personal guarantee. No legitimate lender offers that deal to a fast-growing marine repair chain without extraordinary security. The FBI's conclusion was blunt. Bayline had not accidentally grown into a laundering system. It had been funded into one. The link, according to investigators, was a Mexican national named Gabriel Estrada Vega, a financial logistics coordinator tied to the Gulf Cartel's northern revenue operations. He had no criminal profile that would alarm an ordinary observer. Valid travel history. Legitimate business cover. Clean enough records on the U.S. side to move freely. Yet surveillance placed him at Bayline's corporate office repeatedly over multiple years. Phone records showed hundreds of calls between him and Arsenault. Prepaid devices linked by tower data connected them further. Estrada Vega was the financier and architect. Arsenault was the operator. And inside Bayline, one other executive turned out to be just as important. The company's COO, Darren Thibodeau, had prior Coast Guard experience and controlled logistics, scheduling, route coordination, and internal tracking systems. On a personal encrypted device, investigators later found what may become the most important evidence in the entire prosecution: a ledger-style database, logging compartment installations, loaded vessels, rendezvous coordinates, and receiving vessel identifiers. Entries: 2,714. Meticulous, systematic, operational. The most dangerous moment in the investigation came on February 6, 2026. One undercover agent working a night shift in Houma heard a supervisor mention that corporate wanted to verify some new hires. The phrase was vague enough to be innocent. It was also dangerous enough to change everything. Within 48 hours, 2 more undercover agents at different Bayline locations reported similar comments. The Bureau now faced a choice: pull the agents and preserve their safety, or leave them in place and risk months of evidence collection collapsing if Bayline had actually begun internal counter-screening. Leadership decided to hold. Agents remained inside, but extraction teams were assigned. Tracking locators were issued. High-risk sites received near-term emergency support positioning. For 11 days, nothing happened. Then, on February 17, 2026, Darren Thibodeau appeared at the Houma facility in person and spent time reviewing employee files. The undercover cover identities held. But the clock had started. Every extra day inside the company increased both the evidence and the risk. By the 3rd week of February 2026, the decision was made. The takedown would happen on March 4, 2026. Subscribe to this channel now. The raid is next. The final operational plan took 12 days to build. 4 FBI field offices coordinated it. The DIA's New Orleans Field Division supported it. Coast Guard Investigative Service Headquarters supported maritime planning and aerial coverage. 17 federal warrants were secured covering evidence categories that ranged from financial records and encrypted devices to tools used in compartment construction, prefabricated inserts, vessels in preparation, and currency. Timing mattered. If any bayline location got warning, records could be burned, hard drives could be wiped, vessels could be diverted, and loaded boats already in motion could disappear into the Gulf. So the operation was set for 5:15 a.m. Central Time, early enough for low civilian presence, late enough that night shift workers tied to compartment work would likely still be on site. When the signal went out on March 4, 2026, all 26 entry teams moved. At the Houma facility, the lead team hit the office and the primary shop at the same time. 3 workers inside a large sport fishing vessel were ordered down and detained without resistance. Inside the vessel's engine area structure, agents found a partially completed false wall. Behind it sat $2.8 million in vacuum-sealed cash. At Lake Charles, agents entered a larger multi-building property and found what prosecutors would later describe as the fabrication hub, a workshop with hydraulic shaping equipment, multiple welding stations, and 47 pre-built compartment inserts in assorted sizes. At Pascagoula, 3 boats were tied in the water at Bayline's dock. 2 were clean. The third, a 52-foot Hatteras convertible, contained hidden compartments in the overhead structure and below the salon floor. Combined contents, $7.4 million. At Mobile, agents caught a facility manager trying to shred records during entry. The shredder was seized. Forensic specialists later reconstructed routing schedules and coordinate data from partially destroyed documents. At one location in Morgan City, a suspect attempted to flee by launching a boat and heading south through shallow water. A Coast Guard response unit intercepted him within minutes. By 7 a.m., the main phase of the raid was over. No shots fired, no agents injured, dozens of buildings secured, vessels impounded. 71 people taken into federal custody. Raymond Arsenault was arrested at his home in Houma shortly after 5:20 a.m. He did not resist. Darren Thibodeau was arrested at Facility 12, where he had arrived shortly before the raid. His encrypted laptop was recovered from his vehicle and imaged by cyber forensics teams. Gabriel Estrada Vega was not found at any Bayline property. His last confirmed location had been Houston days earlier. As of the date of the initial indictment, he remained a fugitive. The seizure totals from March 4th told the story in hard numbers. Approximately $389 million in U.S. currency recovered. 14 vessels in various stages of modification, loading, or transit impounded. 47 prefabricated compartment inserts recovered from the Lake Charles facility. Corporate bank accounts holding $14.7 million frozen by court order. But even those numbers represented only a fraction of the estimated total. Most of the money was already gone. By the time the operation hit, federal investigators believed roughly $1.2 billion had already moved beyond U.S. reach through maritime handoffs into cartel-controlled financial channels across Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean. On March 11, 2026, a federal grand jury in the Eastern District of Louisiana returned a sweeping indictment. Charges included conspiracy to commit money laundering, bulk cash smuggling, operation of an unlicensed money-transmitting business, and racketeering conspiracy. Arsenault faced the heaviest exposure. Thibodeau's encrypted ledger became central evidence. Dozens of workers, managers, fabricators, and operational personnel were named or later charged in related districts. Some defendants appeared to know exactly what they were doing. Others claimed they were mechanics, told to complete special projects for above-market pay and not ask questions. The courts will sort that out. But the fallout did not stop with the criminal defendants. Bayline employed roughly 914 people. Only a fraction were arrested. That left hundreds of workers who arrived for shifts on March 4th and found federal tape, seized facilities, closed gates, and no jobs. Families lost income overnight. Commercial fishing operators lost a core repair provider on the edge of spring season. Local marine economies absorbed collateral damage from a case that had been building in secret for over a year. If this story made you think, drop a comment below. Cases like this need to be talked about, and even after the raids, the vulnerability remained. The FBI's post-operation analysis identified offshore receiving vessels that had been photographed but never intercepted. Registrations led to foreign jurisdictions with limited enforcement cooperation. Routes could change, coordinates could shift, crews could rotate. The most disturbing lesson of Operation Dry Dock was not just that Bayline existed, it was that Bayline made sense. Unlike laundering models that rely on cash-intensive storefronts or shell-heavy banking activity, this system avoided the banking system almost entirely. The cash never needed to be deposited in full. It was moved physically, by water, out of the country in vessels that looked recreational, routine, and legally harmless. That exploited a gap. Private boats leaving private docks and entering international waters do not trigger the same kind of automatic scrutiny people assume they do. Maritime enforcement is fragmented, jurisdiction shifts, resources are limited. The Gulf is enormous. Bayline is gone. The fabrication center has been stripped, the facilities are shut, the records have been seized, the routes are mapped. But the demand for southbound cartel cash movement did not end when federal agents entered those marinas before dawn. Somewhere else along the Gulf Coast, another work order is being printed. It says hull cleaning, maybe zinc replacement, maybe fuel system work. The paperwork will look ordinary. The real job starts after the customer leaves.